Namaste. As we as human beings begin to awaken from the first drowse and shock of taking birth in an animal body, as soon as we are done with the first preoccupation with our material survival, we begin to wonder who we are and what this universe is. And depending upon the station of consciousness we assume, we have certain conceptions to quickly run through. To one who is bound by the senses, the physical sensory man, this world is a series of random accidents, the Big Bang and all the rest. Not even the Big Bang actually. It's appalling where somehow he has to survive. He is just preoccupied with that because to the sensory experience, God doesn't exist, soul doesn't exist, all that exists is the body. This is the conception of the sensory man, which of course is an absurdity, and anyone who climbs further in thought can understand it. But not going into that argument. To the soul, the highest experience is that there is nothing else but God. So there are two opposite poles of experience. One at the sensory level, the other is at the highest spiritual level, that all this play is nothing else but the divine, and He has become the play, He is the play. But in between, there is the mind, and the mind forms conceptions. And among them, it tries to understand the relation of God in the world, in which there are two main conceptions. One is that there is God, like an originating power, being, consciousness, whatever we may call it. And once the universe has emerged out of Him, it is a kind of automated process, like its nature, which is unfolding. And there is no real connection, maybe except as a kind of thin cord. So this is the Semitic conception of God, where God stands up above, and God knows how He governs standing up above. He has no clue as to what's happening, but He has many intermediaries, one of them being Mr. Chitragupt, Messrs and Company, or Saint Peter, who is somehow keeping track and allotting us a place in heaven, etc., etc. This obviously is a very childish notion of God. It reduces God to a very anthropomorphic conception. But Indian conception, much wiser, much deeper, much profounder, says that He is not just up above, He descends into the play. So He is there immanent in every element of creation. And in man, there is the possibility of the human consciousness becoming conscious of this immanence, this divine presence which is within. So this is a very much, already we take a leap, that He is not just up above, He is within us. And not only He is within us, we can realize Him. And as a human being begins to approach more and more towards this divine who is within, his nature undergoes a tremendous tumult, upheavals, with sometimes a bursting forth of faculties, capacities of nature, which were hitherto hidden. And there are these beings who, for various reasons, begin to show something more than the mere human in terms of both qualities, in terms of capacities, the superhuman type, the genius in the clay, and in India they are known as vibhutis. So these vibhutis are exceptional manifestations of the divine energies. It can be in any field. And so they are regarded. And because the person is above the normal human, therefore, there is a tendency to deify the person, and sometimes we use the word avatar, which is not applicable, really speaking. He is not an avatar, he is a vibhuti. He is an exceptional degree of human, maybe intelligence, maybe even an emotional genius, maybe in terms of music, arts, speech, learning, several areas. So, heroic warrior, Shivaji or Vivekananda, they are all vibhutis. But then in some people, it is not just an exceptional nature which goes beyond the human limits, but there is a kind of taking in of the divine in the human soul and vice versa. The soul is taken up by the divine, and the divine begins to manifest in the human soul. And these are really exceptional beings, and there are different degrees of that kind of union. So that is also regarded sometimes an avatar. But again, as Sri Aurobindo would tell us, they are yogis, they are great beings. Definitely they have shot beyond the first formula of nature, even beyond the highest human capacity, because they have become one with the divine in different various degrees. It's not that all yogis are the same. There are partial yogas leading to partial glimpses, union, etc. It's a whole range. Then there are some beings who are involutionary beings. These are beings of a higher consciousness. They come from higher planes, like we see that famous story of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, where he is a little child and he goes and asks Vivekananda to come down. In that vision, he is one of the Angiras rishis, and Sri Ramakrishna is the child who is asking him to come down. And then he opens his eyes, he is meditating on one of the higher levels of consciousness, and they come down for the play. So, this is one kind. Again, the word avatar is used here because it's an involution. The avatar word literally means a descent, avataran. So, a being from the higher planes returns, and when he returns from the higher plane, assumes a human body. Obviously, it is a different category of being. So, first was Vibhuti, second is where a human being through the process of evolution, he reaches a point where the divine begins to manifest in a human being in some degree or the other. Then there is a soul which has gone beyond the human cycle of evolution. It has discovered its freedom but returns from one of the higher planes. So that is another kind of, again, a phenomena which is called as avatar, but even this is not what is meant by the avatar in terms of the Gita. Then there are the manifestation where the divine consciousness partially occupies the human vessel. And during moments of this occupation, there is that human consciousness in every way momentarily becomes complete identified with that the divine consciousness and loses its separateness in that. So that example is typically of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, at least one documented, where he used to get in such Krishna bhav, where there is people know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as, the famous movement of Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also known to have once that Chakradhari bhav. And when he was seen in that bhav, the people who were around him, they got afraid because they suddenly saw Krishna holding a Sudarshan Chakra in his hand. That was the kind of manifestation which took place. It's a kind of partial incarnation of the divine. But the Gita goes one step further. And what the Gita reveals to us, in fact, the Gita speaks of 3 secrets. One of them is the Avatarhood. That's why it's a secret doctrine. So, normally, ordinarily, in this entire journey of life, evolutionary journey, we all have the divine within as the guide, the immanent divine who is leading us, guiding us, helping us. It's different thing that man is misleading himself, but God is still, he's like a GPS course correction. He's doing all that. Sometimes he will manifest himself in the form of a guru, representative, a master, yogi, rishi, muni. All that is one part of it. But there is a guidance in life which is helping man to navigate through life. This is the hidden Godhead, normally hidden by the Yogamaya. And from behind the veil he acts. Why he doesn't tear off the veil or comes in the forefront? Because the human vessel cannot bear the onrush. It will break down. But then there are critical junctures in the history of mankind when the entire evolutionary process or the evolutionary experiment, the grand evolutionary experiment taking place upon earth reaches a point where either it is likely to collapse or it has to take a leap. Ordinarily, what happens is this evolutionary process is a double process. There is a pull from above and there is a pull from below. The inconscient, the dark foundation, terrestrial foundation, matter, you see earth has gravity. So similarly, matter pulls the consciousness down, binds it. On the other hand, there is a pull from above to take us upward and upward. And usually a human life is the sum of these two forces. And the collective life of humanity marches slowly in the upward march. But there are moments when the downward forces, and these two poles are required, incidentally, it's part of the divine plan. Why? Because if there is nothing to pull you back, there will be complete disruption. The earth will fall collapsed and the human consciousness will turn prematurely away and unite with the divine. That's not the plan. Plan is on matter, in matter. for the divine consciousness to manifest. So that's why there is something which doesn't allow us to freely escape. There are beautiful lines in Savitri to this effect, that otherwise the soul knows the divine. If it is not allowed this veil and this slow process, then it will just immediately go away and vanish. So this is the process. But the danger and hazard of this process is evidently that a time may come when these downward tendencies may become so strong that a whole human civilization is threatened and may collapse. And that's what is the pralaya, and the whole process is to restart again. So during those times, the divine who is hidden behind the veil, in that sense, everybody is a little chinna chinna avatar of the divine. That's how the Vedantin puts it. That in everybody divine is there. And so what is so special about that avatar? But during such moments of crisis, dharmasya glani, yada yada hi dharmasya glani. So dharmasya glani is not about one religion, or it's about a way of life. The dharma which is meant to lead humanity upward. There is a confusion of dharma. And during that moment, he who is hidden behind the veil steps into the forefront. So what is that veil? That veil is Yogamaya. So in Sri Krishna's story, it's very interesting. Before Sri Krishna comes, it is Yogamaya who comes. And she announces to Kansa that, look here, he who is hidden behind me, she doesn't use this word, but he who is hidden behind me is going to step into the forefront, and your death is now inevitable. He's already born actually. So that's how the story goes. So he comes forward, takes a human body. Now he assumes a human body. So what is the difference in his assuming a human body? Ordinarily, our bodies are built by the, processes of universal nature to support our evolution depending upon our soul development. If the soul is very developed and the body is not of an appropriate make, there is a mismatch, a disparity. If the soul is underdeveloped and you have a body of a very different kind, again there is a disparity. But the avatar's body is made in a very special way. One of the four Manus, who are supposed to be the ultimate form maker for a particular age, they are involved in the making of the body of the avatar, because now there is a special work to be done. So the birth of the avatar is special. It's a Divya birth. It's a conscious divine manifestation taking place in a human body, or in any body, in a fish body or a turtle body, but it's a conscious manifestation. It looks like a human birth for all practical purposes, but ordinarily in a human birth, it's a birth into ignorance. And over a period of lives, one becomes conscious of the divine presence within. But here is the divine choosing to manifest in a human vessel, through a human vessel, and this human vessel itself is prepared in a special way. And therefore, he takes that vessel and then he manifests, and then the process of the avatarhood and whatever is required begins. So, basically, an avatar is always human and the divine, the play of the human and the divine. And this is the second aspect which is very fascinating about the avatarhood, because we have our idea of avatarhood partly because of the stories of Christ, where he is showing miracles, partly also because of stories of Krishna. Now, Krishna's story during childhood are largely story of the inner life, which we have spoken about earlier. But this idea that an avatar is somebody who comes, does arbitrary miracles and goes away. So we are looking in the avatar of miracle, like a miracle doer. Now if you really see the life of many of the avatars, right up to Lord Rama, well, Rama did that great miracle of Gautam Nari Ahilya Tari. That's something. And if you look at his deeds, they are not ordinary, they are extraordinary. But the miracle aspect is not as we want it to be. In Sri Krishna stories, we find that. But otherwise, in Buddha's life again, or in the life of, Lord Parshuram, of course, he was extraordinary in every way, but he's the avatar. So did he do any miracle of that kind? So normally this association of the divine coming, taking a human body, doing some miracles, destroying the forces of downward gravitation, and going back to his dham after establishing the reign of dharma is Though a popular conception, but it misses the central point of the purpose for which avatar comes. So it is like a teacher who comes, and when you are appearing for an exams and you don't understand the subject and you are going to fail, teacher comes and says, give me a paper, I'm going to do it for you. And after he has done, he is the one who has to give grace marks also, and he goes away and all are pass. Now, what does it mean? You are passed, but have you really learned, understood, grown? No. Has your problem of life been solved? No, because you really don't know how to do it. After the avatar goes away, you don't know. You will again look for the avatar. Where are you? And that's how many people look for an avatar. When he will come and relieve me of my problem, suffering and everything. But that's not the purpose of avatarhood, to do some arbitrary miracles and go back. And that's a question which people often ask. They ask, for instance, that Christ is crucified. How can he be manifestation of the divine? Or they ask about Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo left his body. How can he be an avatar? So they miss the whole point. So the point of avatarhood is, on one side, it's a descent of the divine into human. On the other side, it's an ascension of the human into the divine. Yada yada hi dharmasya glani bhavati bharata abhyutthanam. Look at the word, is so beautiful. Abhyutthanam dharmasya tadatma sujama. He comes to uplift humanity. What is this uplifting of humanity? This uplifting is not to come back to the same level, but to show a way, a law of being. And that's why in the Gita, Shri Krishna says that God's own example, he becomes, to start with an example, how to be, how to live. You see, often I use this in terms of Mother and Sri Aurobindo's life. People often ask which books to read for Sri Aurobindo, and they are usually suggested the Life Divine, Savitri, and such. They are wonderful books. Incidentally, Synthesis of Yoga. Another option is just read Sri Aurobindo's life. Sri Aurobindo is life unique. It's like a Bhagavat. How did we grow up into Shri Krishna? We didn't read the Gita as a child. We read Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is not philosophy. I mean, it is a profound philosophy, but it's about the life of Shri Krishna. So when you read the life of Shri Krishna, something seeps inside. Similarly, when you read about Shri Ram and you read the Ramayana, in fact, there is no such thing like Rama Uvach and Rama revealing, but his life becomes an example. Maryada Purushottam. He is so strong. I mean, so many things which I'm sure all of us connect with as a child, that he is so strong, so mighty, and so calm. He's not restless. Even when Janki is gone and he's feeling the sorrow, the burden of sorrow, he still understands that friendship has its own meaning. He's not pushing Sugriv. You dare, why have you delayed? It's Lakshmana who has to do that on his behalf. He's feeling the pain and the sorrow, and yet that's why he's Maryada Purushottam. He has all the strength and the prowess. An ocean will bow down before him, but yet he knows how to control and contain himself. So that's Maryada Purushottam. So this is where the example of God in humanity. In Sri Aurobindo and the mother's life, you see plenty of such examples. People often say when they come here, weather is such, this is such, that is such. Imagine mother came from France and then via Japan, 1920. Till 1973, she never went back. She had a son. Wouldn't she have felt to go back? Look at Sri Aurobindo's life. He is on the peak in the revolutionary movement, where people are hailing him as the leader. For the British government, the most dangerous man, and for otherwise, he is the leader who will lead humanity. But because there is a greater calling, he drops it. And he goes toward that greater calling. Now, there are plenty of things in Mother and Sri Aurobindo's life, just like in Krishna's life, which are so exemplary. In Krishna's life, when we read about, Sudama's story, or when we read about, Sag Bidurka Khana, when we read about that, he makes promise. But for him, dharma is greater than a verbal outer promise that he has made. So many such things, they are very inspiring because it becomes an example. But it's not just the example. You see, an avatar who has never felt grief cannot guide humanity. He experiences the pain of human nature in all its rawness, and then he shows human how to transcend. Take, for example, the story of Sri Rama when he is doing Vilap. One is for, of course, Sita. So he feels that anguish, but through the anguish, he is still searching for her. When Lakshmana is on the, he is hit by Shakti and he may die. At the same time, he is also engaged in how exactly is there a way out that he can be revived. So, that is he's showing us a way that however dark the appearances may be, still keep that hope and keep it alive, burning, because an intervention can come at the last moment and change things. That's one of the things that one learns from the Shakti band which has hit Lakshmana, that a last minute interventions can take place. There is a prayer of the mother like that and can change the fixed course of things. So Avatar, in Savitri we see Savitri grappling with grief. Here is somebody whom she loves and loves dearly, and yet he is going to die. And what is the course she takes? So the Avatar's example is something very, very tremendous, because he becomes human. Therefore, his example is there for human beings to follow. Example of people who at 7 years of age went to Himalaya and came back after 17 years is not valid. Many people don't understand this, that that person never really went through what life is in all its rigor. You can't expect human beings that at 7 years of age I'll walk, or 10 years of age I'll walk into the Himalayas, and then suddenly after 10 years or 20 years I'll get enlightenment, come back and give people a method. That's all right. You can give a method and people can follow it. But that's not the process through which human life evolves. So he shows to human beings how to be, with all the difficulties and challenges of life, how to go further into the next evolutionary level. And Mother and Sri Aurobindo are classical examples of that. Every human aspect of life they took upon themselves, represented it, and showed the way to go beyond it. But this is not all, because even exceptional manifestations through their life, he can lead. But the avatar comes where he, within the body itself, he has taken a human body, he has to upgrade. See, it's very interesting. He has to upgrade this body, because ultimately it's the evolution on the basis of matter. How much ever we may reject matter and the human body, at the end it is said only in the human body can you make progress. So he has to upgrade the human body to the next level of evolution, where it becomes capable of receiving the impact of higher and higher forces. It is implicit in the story of the avatars. In Rama's story, it's very evident. It's not just an evolution in consciousness, it's also an evolution in the body. In the story of Dashavatar, we see that till Parshuram, there is a change of form. After Parshuram also, there is a kind of change of forms. If you see the way, and it's done with a finish, if you see the way Lord Rama is described, holding the temptation of Ajana Bhujishar Chap Dhari Sangrama Jit Khardushnam. What a description of a truly noble warrior. If you read his description, Sri Aurobindo takes great pains in Savitri to describe Satyavan, to describe Savitri, because they are the living examples, physical. How she is, governed by the truth's revealing vault. Immortal rhythm swayed in her time-bound steps. Even her walk is described, her smile is described. But with Krishna, again Krishna's physical body is described. How it is described? He is not Ajana Bhujishar Chapadhari Sangram Jit Kardushnam. He is delight. So Madhuram, 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 Madhuram. Even when he takes the chakra, he is smiling. We associate Krishna with that. His entire body, the way he dances, the way he is a lover boy, the way he is a playmate, the way he is a friend, and yet through all this, he is mighty, his wisdom. In Krishna's life, we see a beautiful fusion of wisdom, love and strength, as we do not find, in the avatars in the past. So, what he has done by taking a human body without us understanding the process, because avatar, even if the whole world doesn't recognize it, it doesn't matter. He will do the work and go. And what is that work? He comes to impress upon matter its own higher possibility. The mother at one place says, it is true that every time the avatar comes, he comes to transform matter. How much can it take the divine possibility? What is the divine possibility? Krishna brings within the human body itself. Look at, Shri Krishna through all the, from his birth till the last minute, through everything, that delight, that ability to hold a thought which goes beyond all the three gunas. If you read Rama's way of life, it is always about there is a, illumined reason which governs your life. But for Sri Krishna, it is dharma assumes a totally different dimension altogether. Freedom and delight, yet governed by truth, because only on the basis of truth can freedom and delight come together and play freely. So he comes and sensitizes the human body to go one grade up. Very often, if you look at the human body itself, the way it has changed from Satyug till today, it's a fascinating study in its own right. If you read the description, or even now, if you look at human body in different races and cultures, which is a different study, I don't want to go into this. But the touch of the avatar invigorates the human body and matter to awaken to a deeper possibility. So what is that possibility? What does he do? He assumes a human brain, he assumes a human heart, and by doing that, and a human body, of course, the brain of man begins to open to a greater thought. Often people speak about, Sri Aurobindo's action because they want to see there. Look at how human thought is changing from the last 30, 40, 50 years. When Mother said in 72, I think, that in 50 years, an entire receptive section of humanity will be absorbed in Sri Aurobindo's thought. Thought basis is the brain. The brain itself will begin to open within itself channels which will instinctively, spontaneously, intuitively begin to open to a greater light and a greater possibility, which is happening. Because he has come and touched, he has taken a human brain. So even when the consciousness withdraws from the physical field, it has left its stamp. And now nature is saying, okay, I have to make brains like your brain. But how was his brain made? In a very special way. So his mind was like an orchestra with many, many concord, universal. But he opened a door to that kind of possibility of an integral thought, of a synthetic thought in mankind, of a thought which combines material life and the spiritual. This is the need. Nowadays, many people, they want the union of these two. Why it has happened suddenly? Up till now, or 50 years back, it was all going away. It has happened because the Lord has come and put his imprint upon the human body. Mother has described this process in great detail. That how she brought in the new consciousness and nature accepted it, and henceforth nature accepts the new substance. So, we are very fortunate that she described it in great detail, and how because of this new substance, matter itself is changing. The body becomes more receptive, and so on and so forth. The human heart can embody a greater love, a vaster love. Isn't it happening automatically? If you really look at last 40, 50 years, the human life, its motives begin to shift and change. Why? Because he has entered into the human body and done something which can be best, one of the terms that I can use is DE, Divine Engineering. So he has come and tweaked the human body. Now, when the avatar withdraws, something very interesting happens. The human body and the human consciousness begins to search for him. See, the withdrawal of the avatar is also a very special phenomena. It begins to search for him, and because it cannot find it, it awakens in an aspiration. And through this aspiration, it grows further and further. So this is the process of avatarhood, and that's why it is said that, see, unlike a mystic, a yogi, a rishi, who gives away, tells a method and says, follow this method. There is a technique, there is a method, and of course there is a guru who will intervene time to time. What does the avatar say? It's very interesting. Avatar doesn't say, I'm giving you a method. Frankly speaking, no avatar has done. Avatar says, I am the gate and I am the way. It is God who has assumed a human body. Christ says that, I am the path, I am the way. Krishna says that, I am the way. Buddha says that, Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. And the mother and Sri Aurobindo say that, I am the gate and I am the way, which is very different from, because the moment now what has happened, how he becomes the gate and the way, the divine who is hidden behind the immanent divine. We don't know how to find him. So most yogis will give you a method, maybe a mantra or something, and he will make an initial connection. The psychic being in man will do the same, and we start going within. But there is no support of name and form. So usually the guru is used as a kind of to support the human mind in its search. But here, the form of the avatar itself, it becomes a tremendous, the avatar is not just a descent outside. He has descended, he has become one with the immanent divine. So, immanent divine, this is, of course, something very interesting, that the immanent divine assumes that form which the avatar has taken. So, when we concentrate within on Shri Krishna, already the immanent divine has accepted this is the form he has taken when he has stepped into the forefront. And therefore, the form itself becomes a passage. The immanent divine assumes the form of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. So when we concentrate within on Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's presence, automatically the gates open and we are uplifted. So this is the other aspect. But there is another aspect of the avatar. So he comes to open the way toward the future, to add, as mother has said, he comes to add a rung in the evolutionary process. Of course, Mother and Sri Aurobindo have added a rung which is not just a rung but a leap. Because within the human consciousness as it manifested in the Vamana, or let's say Parsuram, from there till here there are several rungs which already one has to traverse. Parshuram is a man who is vital, kinetic, dynamic man. You can't reason out with him. When his father says, kill your mother, Parshuram doesn't reason. If someone has done something which is wrong, unrighteous, Parshuram slays. That is the kind of prowess. And he slays whatever is unrighteous. After that, you can't tell Parshuram, sir, please. No, I have come to slay all that is unrighteous, even if it is my own kith and kin. There are other dimensions of this story, but I am not going into that. When Rama comes, Rama sets another kind of, more of a sattvic man. He will not be driven by just rajasic impulse. There has to be reason, there has to be an illumination, there has to be a dharma behind his actions. When Krishna comes, he goes beyond sattva. So within the human range, there is a lot of possibility of progress. This is unique to human beings. Animal consciousness is confined to the form. It moves within the form. But with human beings, with the same form, the body as a pedestal, there is a long journey of evolution of consciousness that takes place. So we see from Parshuram till Shri Krishna, this journey being traversed. But now the human consciousness has to take another leap. And that leap requires at once a change of consciousness and a change of form. Because the form has to be ready to adapt that to that consciousness. So we see this in mother's life. Special way her body was formed. It's all described in Savitri very beautifully. She is born with a mind of light. She is born with a life which is instinct with divinity. A body which is like a parable of dawn. It has come as a temple door to things beyond. It is already instinct with that. Why? Because now matter has this new plan. And therefore, the way is when we come in contact with the persona of the avatar, then that gets transmitted automatically by contagion within us. That is the whole process of yoga, that an avatar comes to release. What does Shri Krishna ultimately tell us? Okay, he gives a process. There are several processes, if you want to put it like that. But what is the ultimate Mahavakya? Mad bhava, mad gata. Think of me, remember me. Become my-minded, my lover, my devotee. Bow down to me. I will liberate you from everything. So it is an ascension affected by the contact between the avatar and the human, where the avatar himself becomes the door and the way. Krishna doesn't say, I am not. People put these meanings. There was someone who spoke to a modern yogi, Gyan yogi, and he spoke about Sri Aurobindo and the mother. He said, no, that's, you are still holding on to the finger, Zen story. They have shown the way. After that, their body, personality is not important. I want to name the person. He is sometimes compared to Sri Aurobindo. But no, sir, that is Gyan Yoga, that is in traditional paths. But Avatarhood is the body, the form of the avatar. His persona is the gate. There are people who have just read Shri Krishna's story and they have evolved to Krishnahood. So the second dimension of avatar is when he comes to give away, upgrade, and then there is the vinashaya cha duskritam. His presence itself. Now, duskritam is not just human beings or evil doers, but also the evil tendencies, which he tends the downward forces of gravitation. He removes them. His very presence is like that. So one of the tasks of the avatar is to work upon the asuras and see to what extent they can be changed, to what extent these tendencies can be changed. And he does it by directly coming in contact with the asuric consciousness. That's a whole big subject. And then he also establishes not just a dharma, not just he becoming the gate, but he establishes a sangha. So sangha is that because the avatar doesn't come to liberate one individual, few individuals, a creed, a cult. No. But a group of humanity. It's a collective march of humanity. Lok Sangrahat. So a group of humanity which is ready for the next level of evolution. They begin to come around, and where do they center themselves around? Around the personality of the avatar. Call it personality cult, well, it's okay. But this is the truth. Of course, it will become a cult when we just do a kind of outer worship. But then even outer worship, because it's around the personality of the avatar that the Sangha grows. So we have in the Bhagavad these three. Bhakt, the seeker, the Bhagavat, the path, and Bhagwan. Where you have Lord Vishnu through whom you grow. So the avatar is that full representation of that. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. So these are the three main works of the avatar. One is his own example, and he is becoming a gate. And around his divine personality, there is the growth of, And again, the mother describes about the divine personality something very interesting. She says the avatar manifests within himself or herself the central will of the divine. For that age, he comes to give a yug dharma. So all who turn toward this divine personality, automatically they come in contact with the central will. It's very difficult otherwise. Maybe one can try that, but it becomes a very easy way. He comes to facilitate the human march. So around the divine personality, there's the growth of the collective consciousness. And then, of course, there's the dharma. There is a wave of humanity for the age in which the avatar has come. Dharma has, one is the eternal connotation, and second is in the unfolding. In the unfolding, the dharma is something which is constantly leading us forward. So there is a yuga dharma which is appropriate to each age. For instance, we are living today in the age when people have explored matter and its depths and what all possibilities are there within matter. So you can't discard it. You have to integrate it, the material life with the higher consciousness. So therefore, dharma in this age will be little different from Dwapar. In Dwapar, it's the heroic age of mankind. But here the dharma is now, because mankind has grown more intellectual, more even to an extent subtler in certain ways. Therefore, there has to be a dharma which is appropriate to the new age. What was valid in Lord Rama's time, Kul, ultimately, that was broken by Shri Krishna. He established the nation unit. But the nation unit, though valid because it's the second step of Vishnu, mankind has to enter into a larger unity. And so Sri Aurobindo comes and gives a dharma which is appropriate to the age. So these are the works of the avatar. His birth is a special birth. It is not an ordinary birth. It is the divine manifesting very consciously through the human vessel. And this manifestation has these two sides. One is the human, where all the challenges of human beings are taken upon the avatar's human aspect. And then the divine who is within, who shows the way, working through the human vessel, human difficulties, human problems, human challenges, to open the way to the future. So his life becomes an example, and of course, he himself becomes the gate and the door, and what he teaches, what he gives to us, becomes the path for mankind for the future. So these are just some of the thoughts about this mystery of Avatar, but Who benefits by the avatars coming? This is the last bit from Essays on the Gita, because often people ask, Sri Aurobindo has come, Mother has come. Now I'm constantly juggling between Sri Krishna and Sri Aurobindo. but but then people ask that, whole mankind, will it grow into supramental beings? Excuse me, no. The answer is very simply no. It is not like avatar comes, opens a possibility which is open. Who will go through? Who accept the possibility? That will be a sizable number. There is a tipping point, to put it technically. When a certain number of critical mass effect humanity is ready and is accumulating on the doorways of the new ascension, then we will see that the rapid transmutation takes place. The rest of humanity will either be transmuted into a higher humanity or will collapse into its animal state, like an abortive attempt. The mother speaks of it, and that's what we see with Sri Krishna's advent. That on one side, there is this kind of, Arjuna becomes the benchmark and yardstick, whereas there are others who tend to go back. So Kali, that's how the Kali comes into existence. So who will benefit from the avatars coming? Not all. First, it will be in a few, then a few more, then a few more, and then to an extent that by this ripple effect, humanity can receive that light. Those who are open and ready to receive. So the inner fruit of the avatars coming is gained by those. This is a take-home point. The inner fruit of the avatars coming is gained by those who learn from it the true nature of the divine birth and the divine works. So it's so important, I feel, that one should read Life of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, along with whatever book one may be reading. The doctrine of Avatarhood is central to the conception to Sri Krishna's life and in the Gita. Central. Very often when we have truncated Gita, Nishkam Karma, all that is fine. But the doctrine of Avatarhood is so central. In this way, it differs from the Upanishads and the Vedas. Or rather, adds one notch upward. And the doctrine of Avatarhood is central to Sri Aurobindo's yoga. Repeatedly he says, this supramental yoga cannot be done by a method, process, technique, human tapasya. It is through the mother, by the mother. So it is, of course, he doesn't say that because she is the avatar. Of course, he has said that she is the divine consciousness. But it is central. It is not a path that people have given, that he has given. Now we can follow. We can leave behind their personality and the persona. Because now they are permanently become part of the earth consciousness. They are not like mystics who have to, or a guru who has to carry on a tradition by transmitting it to the next guru and to the next guru till the lineage stops. Like the 10 Sikh gurus. After a point, the lineage stops. It becomes an organized religion. But here, the persona of the avatar becomes a permanent part of the earth personality. And he enters into, the immanent divine assumes, because he has assumed that form. So through that form, we can come directly in contact with the immanent divine within. The inner fruit of the avatar's coming is gained by those who learn from it the true nature of the divine birth and the divine works. True nature, not just true nature is an ascension of the human soul. As much. True nature is not that he came and destroyed, killed all the Kauravas and many arrogant Kshatriyas on this side, then he went back. The true nature of divine birth and divine works is an ascension of the human into the divine. Just as the divine has assumed his human portion, we must grow divine. That's what Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri. His human portion, we must grow divine. Our life is a paradox with God for key. His nature we must put on as he put ours. This is the true meaning of the divine birth and works. And who, growing full of him, path, who growing full of him in their consciousness and taking refuge in him, the path, with their whole being, Sarva Bhavin, Sarva Dharman Parityaja, Manmaya Mam Upashrita, purified by the realizing force of their knowledge. What is this knowledge he is speaking about? This knowledge of the divine descent in humanity. It is so strange that this is veiled. The asura knows it not. That's how the Gita describes it. So, who are purified by this realizing force of their knowledge and delivered from the lower nature, attain to the divine being and divine nature. Madbhavam. The avatar comes to reveal the divine nature in man above his lower nature. How Shri Krishna lives, it's amazing. He's always happy. The moment you see Sri Krishna, why do you feel that he's always happy, he's smiling? Somehow that image has gone into our heads. Why? Because how can he be Anandamay even on the battlefield? Because he is showing us that it is his play and he has become the play. So he comes to reveal that. And therefore, the avatar comes to reveal the divine nature in man above his lower nature and to show what are the divine works. So what really is the way to do divine works? We see it in the life of Sri Aurobindo and the mother so close to us. In Sri Krishna's life we see, in Lord Rama's life we see. What are the divine works? Free, unegoistic. Imagine what a standard Lord Rama has put how many thousands of years back. What is the standard? It's not just that Father has said, therefore you go into the forest. He has set the highest standard for humanity, even as a king. The kingdom was his, he could have easily taken it. But his taking the kingdom at that point of time would have created disorder and disturbance. What was his standard? He conquers Lanka, but doesn't say, now I am the Chakravartin Samrat of Lanka. It's good if, Mr. P hears. Look at it. What is standard? And that's why in India you will see, when India enters into a territory, India doesn't occupy that space. You see, even in Bangladesh war, so different from spaces where you enter, annex, and for decades you are there, you pauperize and then you come back. Whether it be England, whether it be France, whether it be US, and now whether it be Russia, China, everybody does it. Why in India you don't have this tendency? Because the conception of Avatarhood is very strong. Rama never did that. Even when he annexed, it was to establish dharma. It's got inbuilt within the fabric of Indian consciousness. So we become like them, madbhava, madgata. Disinterested, not for even a battle, you can't fight for your own egoistic purposes, but for the sake of truth, justice, righteousness. Impersonal, universal, full of the divine light. That means a person is completely aware why it is being done. And that yardstick is not personal, egoistic, or selfish. When we look at Sri Aurobindo in the mother's life, it is so inspiring. The mother didn't even bother about having a room for herself. All the time she is busy with the works. Though Shri Krishna said, see, all the time I am busy doing the work. Otherwise, if I were to, there is nothing which I need or want to achieve. And if I were to stop working, the world will collapse. Sri Aurobindo and the mother gave that example very close to us, as living examples. All the time, they were preoccupied with the good of the world. Lok Sangrahart. Full of the divine light, the divine power and the divine love. So, there is the unity of these three aspects in the life of the avatar. He comes as the divine personality which shall fill the consciousness of the human being. Just to think about Krishna, Krishnamay, to become like him. That's how in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's case, that even when he looked at the sea, the blue of the sea, he just wanted to enter into it because he saw in it Krishna. Now somebody will say this is foolish sentimentality. This somebody who speaks about it as foolish sentimentality is very intelligent, except that there is one central stupidity in nature. The person doesn't understand the secret of divine birth. That's why in the Gita it is described as one of the three great secrets. The second, of course, is that divine is within us and it can be realized. And the third is the greatest of all, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Abandon all dharmas and take refuge in the avatar. He comes as the divine personality which shall fill the consciousness of the human being and replace the limited egoistic personality. That is the gopi of the story of gopis and Shri Krishna. And Uddhav, who tells Krishna, teach them a way. What is this that they are dancing? And you think by dancing around you, they will grow into something great. And he deputes him, you please go and teach them. He is authorized. Authorization letter is signed by Krishna. And when Uddhav goes, they snatch away the letter and they say, what is this you people are doing? Krishna has sent me. Oh, Krishna has sent you, let us touch you. don't. So finally he starts telling them a way. Sit down now. So they are all sitting. Why? Because they want to hear Krishna's letter, which is already torn. And then they say, he teaches them, starts teaching pranayam. And the gopi says, question please. What is the question? We had a prana we gave to Krishna. How do we do pranayam? Mad bhavam madgata. They are so full of Krishna. Then when he goes to Radha and asks, he says, you seem a little wise. Tell them, Krishna is not here and who he is and all that theory. Then Radha says, where is Krishna? He is there all the time. And then Uddhav sees Krishna everywhere. In every gopi and gopi sees Krishna. She grants him the vision. See, this mystery, that's why in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, it's not philosophy. You can't practice integral yoga by reading the life divine. One has to surrender to the Divine Mother and become full of the consciousness of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. How? By working, by thinking, by feeling, by turning everything towards them. If nothing else one can do, just walking up to the ashram. Why? Why not? Our Shastras say that every step that you take towards, God is like how many 100 yagyas. So every time you walk with this awareness, I am going to meet God. So this is how he begins to show us. So that it shall be liberated out of ego into infinity and universality. Simplest way, ego. People are fighting. They are trying to conquer the ego by another part of the ego. And at the end they say, see, I am so unegoistic. Ego has said, okay, I have found a door to stay. But when you give yourself to God, where is the thought that, and who has given, what has been given? You are so full of that. So that's what Sri Aurobindo is reminding us. Out of birth into immortality. He who is so full of the consciousness of the divine, taking a human form. Where is life and death for such a person? In life, he is serving the divine in his garden. In death, he is going to his heart, to his bosom, to his lap. Difficult to say which is a greater felicity. Both are a delight. So that it shall be liberated out of ego into infinity and universality, out of birth into immortality. He comes as the divine power and love which calls men to itself. No advertisement. On its own. He just plays the flute. He writes Savitri. Sri Aurobindo did not say you must make it free copy distribution, go to every hospital, whoever is sick, give a copy of Savitri. He didn't say that. But today it's so beautiful to see, at least I am watching it for the last 20, 25 years, the way people have turned to Savitri. It's amazing. So he comes to do that. He comes as the divine power and love which calls men to itself, so that they may take refuge in that and no longer in the insufficiency of their human wills and the strife of their human fear, wrath and passion. See, again the divine personality. Insufficiency of our human will, fear, wrath, and liberated from all this unquiet and suffering may live in the calm and bliss of the divine. Anityam asukham lokam bhajas swamam. Solution he gives. Bhajas swamam. Remember him. Think of him. Nor does it matter essentially in what form and name or putting forward what aspect of the divine he comes. For in all ways varying with their nature, Men are following the path set to them by the divine, which will in the end lead them to him, and the aspect of him which suits their nature is that which they can best follow when he comes to lead them. So it doesn't matter, there should be no quarrels about it. The divine has come, some dance around the divine, some fight against the asuras like Krishna. So each different ways, because he leads us according to our nature. There is no fixed cult. People try to make it. Do it this way. The divine doesn't work like that. He knows what is our need, and according to that, he carries us. What a wonderful path. In whatever way men accept, love, and take joy in God, in that way God accepts, loves, and takes joy in man. If you think Mother and Shri Aurobindo have gone far away, they'll be very far away. Because it's necessary for our progress. If we think they punish, condemn, then well, you will go through that because you are the one you need that. You will not change without that. But if you think that not only is there love beyond any possibility of condemning, beyond any anger, beyond any punishment, but rather they lean 10,000 million times to lift us out, then they will do that. Because as men take joy in him, so the divine takes joy in them. So if you want to play with the divine, wrestler, he says, okay, wrestler. If you want to play with the divine, justice, he says, okay, I'll be the judge. And then you want him to judge others, but you are the one who is being judged all the time. If you want to play with the divine, the best game, redeemer, then he is always redeeming. At the best, or the bestest of the best, is lover and lover. So he is all the time loving you. All shades and forms of love. Hide and seek to the intensest possible union. At every level, the divine will play that. Because that is the way one has turned towards him. In whatever way men accept, love, and take joy in God, in that way God accepts, loves, and takes joy in man. Ye yatha mam prapadyante tans thaiva bhajamyaham. Namaste.
Dada, the question is about conscious will and dynamic action. So Sri Aurobindo reveals that true consciousness is true power. And my question is the poise of Trigunatita in our scheme of things similar to dynamic action and conscious psychic surrender to the Divine Mother? And the second question, you may skip it, is how do we execute a sincere aspiration to help students and professionals open to higher ranges of the mind?
Okay, so actually I can't hear very well, but I have more or less, I think I have understood. Correct me if it's wrong. So first question is about beyond the gunas. Conscious will and dynamic action, going beyond the guna. So there are several things that we need to understand. That you see, in any case, the first step is to understand that all is being done by the divine. This idea that I am the doer is a big illusion. This is the first step to understand. Second one tries to become an instrument of God. I mean, I am talking of how to go beyond guna. So one begins to, that offers the instrument, everything, speech, eyes, ears, feet, hands, everything to God to make him like his breath moves us. So, but there also again there may be the egoism of the instrument. So one begins to even surrender that state of being an instrument of God. So this way automatically, as we see in the Gita, that through this process, automatically the human consciousness ascends beyond the three gunas. So it becomes Trigunatit, meaning thereby it doesn't have those fixed standards of conduct through which it must act. Its operating system changes into expressing the divine will in creation. That's what basically going beyond the guna means, that you are no more acting through the lens of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. So Sattva is by certain ideas, ideals, moral, social, ethical, etc. And Rajas is where we are acting based on our personal likes, dislikes, our selfish interest. And tamas is where mechanically, habitually, ritualistically we are doing an action. But now we are being impelled by the divine. This what going beyond the three gunas means, and that is what the Gita, yoga of the Gita, takes us to. But Sri Aurobindo goes one step further, and because yoga of the Gita says still the action, though you are inwardly beyond the gunas, but nature is still under the gunas, so it suffers from the limitations. Whereas in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, the gunas are also transformed. So Sattva Gun transmutes into a self-existent knowledge which automatically pours through the Adhar. So Sattva Guna ordinarily is Sukham and Prakasham. It becomes a self-existent delight and light which expresses itself through the mind of the devotee. And similarly, Rajogun, where you are striving and struggling, changes into a self-existent luminous force, consciousness force of the divine. So it achieves what it has to achieve. And the third is the Tamoguna, it changes into a self-existent peace. So all action is on the basis of a deep inner peace. It's not like either troubled or it becomes tiring and exhausting. So this is the kind of transmutation of the guna. And this, the simplest way is to think of the divine, to live for the divine, to work for the divine, to belong to the divine. This is the path which we have just read. That's the simplest way. Because if we sincerely practice it, automatically the nature starts getting tuned to the divine. Otherwise, the other way is practice equanimity, get rid of preferences and desires, a tremendous amount of sincerity, and then in that state, try to go inside and feel the divine will. So first one has to be freed from all selfish, egoistic interests that one takes. The paradox is that this is not easy because sometimes the action which the ego may take is the same action which the divine wants you to take. But the standard is different. Arjuna, in an egoistic state, may well have taken to the war. And the divine also wants him to go to the war and fight this battle. But the difference is that the inner state changes completely. So when we practice this equanimity and desire, and we don't falsify or distort the action, we become that's why yoga karmasu kaushlam, the action becomes flawless. It flows from a height and reaches back to its mark. So these are the differences, when we turn to the divine and let him act through all means in every way. So if you read Sri Aurobindo's, that's what the entire yoga is about that. In Sri Aurobindo's yoga, it is about the mother. Be full of the mother. Turn to the mother, love the mother, live for the mother, work for the mother, belong to the mother. That's enough. So aspiration, that's what aspiration is. Aspiration is something like, where do we want to go? So aspiration is compared to a fire. Fire is the leader of the journey. Agan, aag, aage. It is leading us. So ultimately when we turn to the divine, why have we turned to the divine? So if we answer this question, then the core aspiration will come out. If we have turned to the divine to become a yogi, to have power, to help humanity, then it's a non-starter. It's a desire, it's an ambition. But when we turn to the divine, because we can't live without the divine, we cannot imagine existence without the divine. And we have no other goal except the divine for the sake of the divine. Even if he takes our choti and makes a damru out of it, fine, doesn't matter. If he plays a flute through us, fine. If he makes a sword and fights a battle, fine. If he breaks the sword and keeps it aside, fine. So if he makes us the dust of his feet, fine. If he makes us a diamond close to his heart, fine. Any which way, it's fine. That kind of surrender is required in a yoga of this nature. This utter surrender to be what the divine wants me to be.
Thank you, Alokda. There is one more question from Dr. Amrapalli Patil ji. She's asking, how does one understand Bhagwan's leela other than just meaning it's a divine play? And how can we contemplate and use this concept of leela for our purpose of self-elevation in life?
So this, we just had a talk, I can almost refer to it. Krishna Leela we just had few days back, and it's there on the YouTube, it's in detail. But the Leela of the Lord, the fundamental take-home point is, no egoistic looking at life can ever reveal to us the secret of the Leela. The Leela can only be understood when we drop the scales of the ego, because then we understand that Leela is not for my personal advantage. See, why don't we understand God's play? Because I am looking at it, how does it affect me personally? So in the Leela, well, Mahabharata is the Leela of the Lord where Abhimanyu dies. It's the Leela of the Lord where all the 5 children of the 5 Pandavas die. Yet it is the Leela of the Lord. Where Draupadi is disrobed, it's the Leela of the Lord. By personal egoistic standards, we cannot understand. And yet, because Draupadi was disrobed, the entire Kuru clan was in the balance of justice. It tilted. It was understood that they are going to be destroyed. Because Abhimanyu died, it opened the doors to the fall of the great warriors. Because the 5 Pandava children died, the crown went to Parikshit, whom Krishna had given life while in the womb. So you see, the Leela of the Lord, any personal ego, they had the roles to play, they did play their roles and went back. Abhimanyu immortalized himself by his death. See the difference. If you look at egoistic standards, अरे क्या कृष्ण जी ने कर दिया, अपने भांजे को तो बचा लेना था. That's not how God acts. Draupadi's disrobing revealed her the Yagyaseni in her, that the fire in a woman's heart can destroy entire civilization. If you want to take home point from that story for today, don't mess with a woman's integrity. Give love, she will give herself with love. Don't try to force possess or anything. I mean, this is one of the sidelights of the story. So there are, the power of love. Draupadi's heart, that love, when it turns the other way, it can bring down a whole civilization. Same thing in the story of Sita. So, same thing with Helen of Troy, if you want to look at it like that. So, when we get rid of the egoistic standard, supposing Draupadi said, what kind of Sakha you are, you left me like this to be humiliated in front of Kauravas, would she have ever understood the Leela that is going on? Draupadi was born to set a very high standard for humanity. And she did it going through this challenge and the ordeal. So the Leela of the Lord can only be understood when we drop all our egoistic ways, selfish ways of looking at life and creation. This universe and the divine is not meant to satisfy my little ego personality. If anything, he is meant to chip it off and at one point of time break the shell so that the truth can be liberated. That's the real thing. And yet this structure of the ego is important at a given point of time in ignorance. How can we do that? By becoming Madbhavam. By turning all our being to the Lord, by loving Him, by adoration, by praying, by giving ourselves to Him, by working for Him, by every breath, every heartbeat consecrating to Him. The more we can do it, the more sincerely we can, do that, the more He takes us into Himself, our own burden. Then the Leela of the Lord becomes very clear. Then we see that our misfortunes were the greatest blessing. Then we say, like Sri Aurobindo, O misfortune, blessed art thou, for thou hast shown me the face of my beloved and lover. Then we can understand. Otherwise, the Leela, with the egoistic standard, man has never understood the divine. Often he has made a hodgepodge and a mess. That if you do this, Krishna will be pleased, he will give you a child, he will give you this. That's how people do it. With mother also people do it. But that's not how the divine operates. Divine's main purpose is growth of consciousness. Help us progress on the pathways of dharma. So that's the way to understand the Leela in short. And most importantly, the divine does not govern this creation in absentio, sitting up there on the cloud with a computer where he is all the time monitoring us. He enters the play. He becomes the play. He is the play. All he loves, all he moves, all are his, all is he. This is the greatest truth that we need to remember all the time, that there is nothing else but him. Then the Leela becomes very easy to understand. Why we are not able to comprehend? Because we are standing in between. That's what ego does, it veils us. So we are not able to understand that he is playing with himself. The moment Arjuna sees how liberating that vision is, whom is Krishna destroying? Himself. Whom is Krishna freeing and giving birth to himself in a new mode of manifestation. So the divine is playing with himself. And yes, as long as it is a mental concept, it's difficult. But if we walk with the staff of faith and devotion, then this mental concept changes into a real living experience. And then, even when we are thrown out of our home, like Meera, we don't complain, we don't grudge. We only say, "Oh, lover, I mean, everything you have taken, but give yourself, that's all I want." And then Krishna will appear and say, "Don't ask me to give myself. You give yourself to me. The rest I will handle." So that is the story. Egoistic consciousness can never understand the divine. It can form concepts. It has done that. God is there punishing and rewarding. All these are egoistic ways of looking at life. All these are separate people with whom he is justice he is doing. There is a universal justice, but that's not how God acts. If somebody is rich, it is because God meherban hai. If somebody is poor, that means God is annoyed with him. All these are man-made concepts meant to give solace to the egoistic religious man because he has to believe in God. So how will he believe unless you tell him these nice stories? But the time for these stories have gone. The time has come to realize that all is He, there is nothing else but Him.